What's up, everybody? Welcome to Space Arena Ground Arena. Doing a deck tech video on Han Command. Going over the list that I took to Store Showdown like 2 weeks ago on May 11th at the Banish Zone. Played Han Command. I tested the deck for like 2 days before I took it to the event. Finished 4-1 in Swiss, which was third overall, and then lost in top 8. But just quick going over the Han deck. This is how we're going to break it down. What makes it work? The flare. Attack the mulligan. What do we do with it? Sideboard and possible improvements moving forward. So here was the list I took to the Banish Zone. Quick overview. I ran the droid package, so 3R2, 3 C3PO, 3 Leia, 2 Sparkle Rebellion, 1 Akbar, 3 Echo Base Defender, 3 Resupply, 3 Ezra, 3 Falcons, 2 Rogue Operatives, 3 Waylays, 3 Fleet Lieutenants, 2 Wing Leaders, 2 Bright Hope, 2 Azatuk Liberator Gunships, 2 Chewbacca's, 3 U-Wing, 2 97th Legion, 3 Han Solo, 2 Home 1, and then my sideboard was a 3rd Spark, 2 Bodhi, 1 Syndicate Lackey, 2 Rogue Squadron Skirmisher, 1 Change of Heart, a 3rd Home 1, and 2 Reinforcement Walkers. So what makes Han Command work and what makes Han work? For me, it was starting off with the Han Solo leader. He allows us to play a strong tempo game where we can go up a resource any turn we want, as long as we have cards in our hand. And on his deploy turn, he has the ability to go up +2 resources. So you have to be careful and use his ability wisely. There's a lot of decision points with Han, but he allows us to play a strong tempo game and out tempo our opponents. So the droids and Ezra, they make the deck much more consistent because with Han, since we're putting cards from our hand into our resource row, we're losing card advantage from hand. So the droid package and Ezra really make us more consistent. They give us a card advantage when we should be at a card disadvantage, and they help keep our hand full. And the R2 and 3PO aren't very threatening units, but they are threatening with Han because of what they allow you to do, and just draw cards every turn. And the same thing with Ezra. He's like an extra card in your hand. And Ezra is also really good because he can trade with a lot of the aggro units and survive. He's a really good unit to play too. So the flair of the deck, the stuff that makes it nice and shiny and exciting. Starting off with the Falcons, one of the 2 best space units in the game, probably 3-4 that comes in ready. Now you have to pay tax on it every turn. And how you play the Falcon changes on the archetype you're playing. Against aggro, you can probably keep it out most of the time because you're going to destroy whatever space units they're playing. If you need to, you can bounce it back to hand to heal it, play it again. There's some plays where you can play Falcon attack, you can play another Falcon and attack, so you can get a lot of damage with the Falcon. Falcon's really strong. And the way it works is with Han, when you use his ability to play a resource, since you have to defeat a resource, you can exhaust the resource to pay for the Falcon and then defeat that exhausted resource. So you don't go down like -1 a resource for the turn. You are like overall going back to like where you should have been, but you're not starting with one already exhausted. So you have to be smart about playing the Falcon, when to play it, when to pay the tax, when to bounce it to hand. Um, that's all stuff that comes with reps, really. There's not really a perfect how to on the Falcon. I will say against control decks a lot of the time, I will bounce the Falcon to hand. If I'm not going to be able to protect it like with other units, to play around like Power of the Dark Side and stuff so that I can have a 3 damage every turn. U-Wing Reinforcement is an amazing card and it's really good with Han. It allows us to play up to 3 units with a combined cost 7 or less, and we can play them for free. So we get to play up to 3 units for free. So we can, against control, this is nice because we can refill our board after it's been wiped out. Against aggro, it's really good because we can overwhelm them. And most of our units are going to be able to trade with the aggro units. And against mid-range, it's hard for them to stabilize against the swarm. We can also pull our Han Solo unit, which on turn 5, when you're doing this U-Wing play most of the time, Han can just ambush and he can just keep your ground under control all by himself. And then home 1, when we get to home 1, big capital ship 7/7 in space with a restore 2 and lets us play. Cost 3 or less, basically for free. So you can, if you have more resources available, you can play a more expensive card. You can play a heroism card from your discard pile that costs 3 less. A lot of times I would pull Akbar with this. I would pull Falcons with this. I would pull Echo-based Defenders with this. There's a lot of flexibility in what you can pull. Um, whatever you need to make your board better. It's nice if you can pull a Falcon with it, because then the Falcon will attack and have restore 1 a lot of the time if you pull the Falcon, which is nice since it comes in ready. It's a nice little play with 1/1. Some more of the tech. So these are cards that are in here for specific matchups. So the Echo-based Defender is for the aggro matchup. Bright Hope is in here for aggro and the Boba matchup because Bright Hope takes 2 fire spray hits, force defeated, and Sabine and Leia's decks with space units are gonna have a hard time getting through Bright Hope. It's gonna take up a lot of attacks. Chewbacca's really solid into pretty much everything but control. Um, he's really good against Sabine, pretty decent against Boba Fett. He's just a solid unit. And then Spark of Rebellion is really good against Boba Fett, and it's really good against control decks. So that's why those are in here. So what are we looking for in our mulligan? Versus control, I was going for the droids. Um, I against control, I wanted to play. I played Krennic and I played Palpatine. I won 2-1 against both those decks. They were both green blue. Just one was Krennic and one was Palp. Uh, I was looking for the droids because playing both droids, turn 1 gave me a card and it gave me protection for Power of the Dark Side. And the way the deck was built, most of the time with C3PO, you're going to call 3. Even if you don't have R2, I feel like C3PO is more important than R2 for Han. The way it was built, I would just call 3. So as my deploy turn, then I would call 7 so that I could try to draw like a U-Wing or a 97th Legion or a Han because I didn't want those going to my resource row. So most of the time, I would call 3 unless it was my deploy turn. Um, then I'd call 7, sometimes 8, but most of the time 3 or 7. Uh, so I really wanted the droids versus the control decks because they just set me up to have a good hand, and we wanted to have multiple units on the board to play around the Power of the Dark Side play. It's really important versus control. Against aggro decks, I wanted the Falcon or Ezra. I would try to go second and try to get them to play a unit first so that wherever they committed, I had the answer because the Falcon or Ezra is going to answer whatever unit aggro is going to play and survive. So you can put them back a whole turn, uh, and you're, ahead 2 turns basically at that point. So Ezra and Falcon are both really good plays against aggro turn 1. Versus mid-range decks, it kind of depended on the mid-range deck. You could go for droids or Ezra for card advantage. If I was playing Boba Fett, I'd really want to have Bright Hope in my hand. Chewie's good too, but I think Ezra is really the MVP of the Han deck since he allows us to play with an extra card in the top of our deck, basically. So Ezra in the mid range and Bright Hope in the mid range, and Chewie too. If I knew they weren't gonna have a lot of space decks, I would probably try to get Chewie out. Um, to slow them down a little bit, not let them stabilize while I set up my thing. Because uh, other than Luke Command, Han Command has a pretty good mid late game versus other mid range decks uh like Boba Fett's, especially the mono Boba that's been around. That plays more like an aggro deck and is more of an aggro deck. So the top end is Fire Spray, and if you have Bright Hope out, you're really going to slow down that Fire Spray for 2 turns basically. So that allows us to stabilize and get our Han unit out, our 97th Legion out, and our like home ones and stuff out because our late game is going to be reinforcement walkers. It's just going to be a much stronger late game um, than what the other mid range decks are able to do. So what do you do with this deck if you're looking to play it? Turn 1, you're looking for early advantage with the droids or Ezra by using the Han ability turn 1. You can safely Han ability once, maybe twice before the deploy turn. Any more than that, you're not going to have a hand. too dangerous, you're probably gonna lose. On turn 5, most of the time we're gonna deploy and go +2. If we don't have U-wing or Han, but we do have a home 1 or reinforcement walker, you can wait around till you're on the 6 resource turn, and then you can bump to 8. So you either go from 5 to 7 or 6 to 8 is normally the play line. And into aggro and cheaper mid-range decks, you want to trade early with with your units like your Falcons and your Ezras, your stuff that's gonna take a unit out and still live, your 4 health things. Because we, like I said before, we have a much stronger late game most of the time. And also, if they have a 25 health base, if you can set it up, don't be afraid to race them. We're running a 30 health base. We're already starting 5 damage ahead. Um, the droid version isn't as aggressive early as some of the other Han command decks around, but it is a little more consistent. So don't be afraid to go aggressive early, and not trade necessarily like in a Sabine. Like if you trade once or twice, that's probably okay. But if you're playing a Sabine ECL deck, just try to race them. Um, because your units are going to be stronger, so you can take those smart trades, and you're going to be able to push more damage through because they're not running any removal. So, um, something to think about. And then into control, you got to play around Power of the Dark Side. You can use, like I said earlier, you wing to refill your board. And we can really win by out tempoing control and getting under them. Their late games are going to be just as strong or stronger than ours, so we got to get in there. I did have against Palp 97th Legion close a game out off a U-wing, like the next turn, a U-wing claim, next round, 97th Legion. So you got to play around. You got to know what to play around. So if you're playing against control decks, you got to play around Power of the Dark Side. Playing it against Palp, you got to play around him stealing your units. So that's all stuff you got to think about when you're playing. The sideboard, the big ones were Bodhi, um, Spark of Rebellion, Reinforcement Walker, Change of Heart, the third home one for control deck. So Reinforcement Walker allows us to draw. It's another way we can draw cards late game. Bodhi, we can pull those events. And Change of Heart, we can steal their big units that they're playing to try to end the game. So Rogue Squadron Skirmisher and Syndicate Lackeys for the aggro matchup. Syndicate Lackey one-shot Sabine. Rogue Squadron Skirmisher only hits for 4, but can hit a lot of units. And we can pull back a Leia. So we can pull back a Leia, ready resource or exhaust a unit, so we can go up on a lot of tempo there. Versus mid-range, I wouldn't side too much. It was pretty solid. Um, into the mid-range decks. I'd say the weakest matchups for this are probably Cheered Aggression and Luke Command, because Luke is running basically the same late game, and the ability to shield really hurts our ability to trade effectively. So it makes Han or Luke a challenge for Han, and then Cheer It if they're force throw wrecks Han pretty good. So if you got a buddy that likes playing Han, play Cheered Aggression and force throw him all the time. He won't be able to use his Han ability. He won't be able to go up on tempo because you're ripping his advantages out of his hand. Which is why I like the droids, and which is why I like Ezra and Reinforcement Walker because it allows us to play with more cards. But force throw is a huge problem for Han. Um, yeah, so other improvements. I have changed my deck list since this event a little bit. Some things you could do. I still have the droid package in mind, but I did drop to like 2R2, and I dropped the Leia and added Battlefield Marines so I can try to go a little more aggressive early. But you could drop the droids and rebels altogether and go more aggro with Greedo and Battlefield Marines. Um, Another thing I've been messing with and thinking about is Change of Heart and Traitorous in the main deck instead of sideboard options. And Mercenary Company is basically poor man's Vader, 5/5 with Ambush and Overwhelm. It doesn't pull you a unit, but it's only cost 6. And looking for, because if you're playing against the Boba Cunnings that are running around, they're going to ice you as soon as you deploy Han with either Cunning or No Good to Me Dead. So having a 6 drop in our back pocket that we can play and still be effective um, when we're trying to go up +2, but we can only get the +1 because we get iced. Um, mercenary company as a 5/5 with ambush and overwhelm. I think can have some play. So that's other stuff I'm looking at improvement wise. Um, that was just real quick deck tech based on the list I played. Go back to the beginning. On the list I played at Banish Zone Store Showdown. The winner was Sabine Cunning. I think there was 3 Sabines in top 8. There was me and another Han uh, in the top 8, which didn't have the droid package. Um, and then and that was random number gaming. So go look up. I think he's done deck videos on his, so you can go look his up. His Han command list. Yeah, 4-1 in Swiss. My round 1 match was against Sabine Cunning, who ended up winning the event. I won that 2-1. Second round was against Krennic Command, who was also in top 8. I won that one 2-1. Home 1 was the MVP, along with the droids. Like any game I got the droids out round 1, I completely obliterated my opponent. Like it was just overwhelming. Game 3 I played against Cassian Command. I took that one 2-0. In the fourth round I played Palp. Vigilance won that one 2-1. And then round 5 I lost 2-0 to Sabine ECL, and could not trade effectively. Um, I could not. I just couldn't find the units I needed to have to trade into Sabine effectively. Lost 2-0 to that Sabine ECL deck, and then in top 8 I won game 1 pretty easily into Loot Command, and then game 2 I got blown off the table, and then game 3 was really close, really tight. I'm pretty sure that Luke command deck healed about 20 to 30 damage. Um, Redemption, home 1. Yoda was out there. There was a Bright Hope with a devotion on it. Like there was just so much damage that Luke healed that I between the shields and all the healing, I got outlasted and lost that. And then yeah, then that was my day with this deck. I'm planning on running in a store champ or store showdown this weekend with a slightly adjusted list. Like I said, I went down to 2 R2s because I feel like 3PO is a little more important. I went down to 2 Echo Base Defender, added 2 Homestead Militias. I went down a Leia. I dropped the 97th Legion, which I did like for the event, but I added Reinforcement Walker main deck, and I did add Change of Heart and Traitorous. So there's some other changes, but um, the core of what Honda is allowing you to play a strong tempo game. You can trade effectively into um, aggro decks, and you can have a stronger late game than most mid-range decks. And then you can be fast enough with your tempo game to get under control decks. So I think Han Command is a really solid list. I think Han Command is also a very difficult list to master and pilot because there's so many decision points. When you look at your hand, you could go 30 different ways every game, depending on what you resource and what you the extra card you're gonna row because of the Han ability. And yeah, there's just a lot with Han. My brain kind of hurts when I'm done playtesting, but I like Han. He's a lot of fun. So go ahead and give it a try, and we will see you in the arenas.